Have you ever noticed how some people seem to possess an almost supernatural control over their surroundings without uttering a single word? They don't raise their voice. They don't plead. They simply withdraw. And suddenly, everything shifts. The energy in the space transforms, and those around them begin to feel confused and anxious. Imagine what would happen if you applied this tactic to your own life. What if you chose not to react immediately to every event, opting for silence instead of automatic responses, and withdrawal instead of emotional outbursts? This is the crucial point. When you stop being constantly available, emotionally, physically, and psychologically, the world around you can be shaken. This is because others have grown accustomed to controlling you by leveraging your reactions, impulses, and predictability. But the moment you decide to disengage, the rules of the game fundamentally change. Those who thought they knew you well suddenly realize they have no idea who you truly are. As Carl Jung once noted, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Consider this. When you become unavailable, who displays the most desperation? Who experiences irritation? Who tries to provoke you to elicit any emotional reaction? This speaks far more about them than it does about you. And most importantly, it reveals the extent of manipulation you've been subjected to, perhaps without even realizing it. You continue to give of yourself, striving to please others, maintain peace, and avoid losing people who, deep down, were never truly there for you. With every forced yes, every hasty reply, every emotional reaction, you surrender a piece of your energy. What remains at the end of the day? Exhaustion, frustration, and an inexplicable emptiness. The reason is simple. You are too available to those who don't deserve a minute of your time or attention. This isn't about turning away from the world, but about choosing yourself. It's about embracing what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming a whole, authentic, and complete individual. This process begins with the realization that silence can be more powerful than 1,000 arguments, and that withdrawal, when it stems from awareness rather than a desire to escape, is a manifestation of strength. How long will you allow others' emotions to control you? How long will you react like a puppet every time someone touches your vulnerable spots? Perhaps it's time to sever those strings, withdraw, and become an enigma. Because when you stop being available, everything changes. From childhood, you were taught to always be present, to respond quickly, to please and to say yes, even when you wanted to say no. You were conditioned to believe that your worth lay in your availability to others. But here's a truth perhaps no one told you so directly. Excessive availability is not a virtue, it's a prison. And as long as you continue to think you must be constantly available, emotionally or otherwise, you will be manipulated, drained, and forgotten the moment you cease to be useful. What lies at the root of such behavior? It's that by being constantly available, a person becomes predictable, essentially transforming into a tool. Others begin to perceive them as an emotional button to be pressed when attention, sympathy, or approval is needed, and then put back on the shelf until next time. Often the person doesn't realize this, falling prey to the illusion that their willingness to always be there will make someone reciprocate. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. As Carl Jung noted, each of us wears a persona, a mask designed to secure acceptance, love, and recognition. This very mask keeps individuals in a state of excessive availability, They say everything is fine even when they can barely breathe, instantly reply to messages when utterly exhausted, constantly explain and justify their actions as if they owe the world something. But the truth is, by placing themselves at the center of others' lives, people gradually disappear from their own. Constant availability is a veiled form of self-abnegation, a way to seek approval, avoid rejection, and attempt to control others' opinions. However, this control comes at a high price: the loss of peace and vital energy, which is carelessly expended despite not being limitless. People who demand constant availability often don't need the person themselves, but rather the resources they provide: approval, companionship, entertainment, emotional comfort. And when a person changes, sets boundaries, and refuses to react, these same people begin to show irritation and accuse them. The reason isn't the person's changes, but that they have ceased to be convenient and functional. And here comes the most unpleasant part. The more available a person becomes, the less they are valued. What is given too easily turns into an emotional doormat. No one respects what doesn't need to be earned, nor appreciates what is always at hand. Therefore, it's worth pausing and reflecting. Who truly deserves your time, attention, and presence? And perhaps, who deserves your absence? But before answering these questions, it's essential to understand why such a strong reaction and willingness to give in arise. What lies behind this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in the concept of psychic energy, as discussed by Carl Jung. For energy is the most precious thing a person possesses, and if they don't learn to protect it, someone will inevitably use it against them. Carl Jung did not view the psyche as a mere automaton, thoughtlessly reacting to external stimuli. In his view, the mind is a complex energy system where every thought, emotion, and action consumes a certain amount of energy. The question is simply, who decides where this energy will be directed? The individual themselves or the outside world? Every impulsive reaction, defense against unfounded criticism, response to provocation, attempt to prove oneself right, engagement in meaningless discussions, and desire to please those who don't appreciate it. All these expend internal strength on things that yield no benefit. And, as Jung emphasized, what one resists, persists. The more one reacts, the more one binds oneself. Emotional exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but the result of misdirected energy. A person living in a state of constant exhaustion becomes particularly vulnerable. This vulnerability makes them an easy target for manipulators, opportunists, and those with emotional dependencies. They unerringly sense that such a person doesn't know how to conserve their energy, reacts to everything, and constantly tries to solve the world's problems. And they exploit this without a second thought. Carl Jung asserted that a healthy psyche knows how to retain energy within itself. This implies the ability to say no without feeling guilty, to remain silent without feeling like a coward, and to observe before acting. True strength lies not in blind reaction, but in the conscious choice of when and how to act. This is only possible when a person knows themselves well enough to recognize their own impulses. How often have you lost sleep over unresolved arguments? How many hours have been spent mulling over what you should have said, or trying to understand the reasons for poor treatment? This is energy irrevocably draining away. You are keeping alive ghosts of the past that should have long vanished, and fueling dynamics that exist only because you persistently seek answers. Psychic energy is like a force field. When it is well protected, it creates a sense of presence. A person walks into a room and commands respect without uttering a word. But when this energy is poorly managed, they become invisible, reactive, and fragile. The world is harsh to those who easily give in. Therefore, it's essential to start observing your own triggers. What makes you react automatically? What throws you off balance? It is at these points that energy leaks, and this is precisely what needs to be addressed. Not to become cold or indifferent, but to be selective and sovereign over yourself. And here arises one of Jung's greatest revelations. By conserving your energy, you disrupt the projections that others impose upon you. This causes significant irritation for manipulators, as it touches upon a dark territory, the realm of silent manipulation. Opportunists feed on others' energy, and unavailability deprives them of this opportunity. You must confront those who have constantly drained you, perhaps without even realizing it. It may seem that the situation is under control, that your reactions are a conscious choice, but the truth is far more complex. Most emotional reactions are programmed, and those who understand this can easily manipulate others. Opportunists don't need to raise their voices, threaten, or force events. They simply press the buttons left open and elicit the expected reaction. Jung called this projection, a psychological mechanism by which people project onto others what they cannot see within themselves. But there's another side to this phenomenon that few notice. While others project their qualities onto a person, that person becomes a receptacle for these images. And the more emotionally available they are, the more they become a blank canvas for these projections. Surely, everyone has encountered that friend who only remembers their existence during a crisis, that partner who constantly needs saving, or an acquaintance who showers praise only as long as there's some benefit to be gained. It's crucial to understand that such relationships are far from accidental. These individuals interact not with the real person, but with an imagined image, with the role that the person themselves allows them to impose. But why does such compliance arise? Often, it's dictated by the fear of disappointing, the fear of losing love, or of being rejected. The most sophisticated manipulations rarely manifest as open conflicts or shouting. Far more often, they take the quiet form of guilt. A person feels obligated to another, believes they must always be available, ready to help, obligated to understand, even if it destroys them from within. The key point here is that the manipulator doesn't need to fully control their victim. It's enough for the person to continue reacting in the usual way. But as soon as one changes their reaction, the entire game collapses. When a person starts saying no, responding with silence, or distancing themselves instead of offering excuses, all the manipulator's projections lose their power. The mask they tried to place on their victim falls, and this throws the manipulator off balance, as they no longer understand who they are dealing with. Worse still, they are forced to look within themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. Unavailability becomes a threat because it forces others to confront their own inner emptiness. Silence exposes the inner chaos they don't want to hear. In response, there might be an attack, criticism, or emotional drama. The reason isn't that the person is doing something wrong, but that they have ceased to be a convenient mirror in which the manipulator saw only what they wanted to see. As Jung said, enlightenment comes not through the contemplation of light images, but through the realization of one's own darkness. When a person withdraws and stops feeding the vicious cycle, the other's shadow begins to emerge, and this becomes unbearable for those who have always used them as a means of escaping themselves. But is the person themselves ready to cope with the discomfort of misunderstanding, rejection, or even aggression in response to attempts to protect themselves? Are they ready to endure the silence that follows the break? It is in this silence that a new strength emerges. In today's world, where everyone strives to be heard, rushes to respond, engages in meaningless arguments, and proves themselves right, even at the cost of their own peace, there exists a power few know about, and even fewer know how to wield. This is the power of silence. Not a silence dictated by passivity or cowardice, but a conscious, strategic, and utterly clear silence. A silence that is not an absence, but an amplified presence. Jung viewed silence not as emptiness, but as fertile ground for inner transformation. By ceasing to react, one begins to observe. And in the process of observation, one notices patterns that previously went unnoticed. Emotional repetitions, manipulative games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for clarity, and clarity poses a danger to those who seek to control. Surely many have noticed how some people begin to show anxiety and even panic when they don't receive an immediate response or explanation, when a person simply disappears from their sight. And it's not so much about longing for a specific individual as it is about the feeling of losing control over the situation. After all, as long as there's communication, as long as there are words and explanations, the game continues by familiar rules. But when silence falls, the rules change, and this destabilizes those accustomed to feeding off others' reactions. True silence is not merely the absence of sound, but rather the art of managing one's own energy. It's a conscious refusal to get involved in others' emotional dramas, a wise decision not to expend energy on pointless battles. As Jung said, the process of individuation, that is, becoming oneself, requires distancing from the external world, for only in silence can one hear their inner voice, unmuted by the noise of others' opinions. However, don't harbor illusions. Silence comes at a cost. It distances you from those who only valued you for the role you played, making you incomprehensible to those who saw only a reflection of their own projections. You might appear cold, detached, even arrogant, but all of this is merely the reaction of those who didn't seek genuine depth, contenting themselves with convenient functionality. And the harsh truth of life is that with age, one becomes increasingly selective in their words, understanding that every utterance is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to personal truth. At times, silence is not an escape, but a manifestation of sovereignty, the language of those who no longer need to prove anything. Silence causes discomfort because it forces the other person to confront their own thoughts, their inner chaos. And this discomfort reveals far more about them than any arguments could. There is no need to explain your absence. It speaks for itself. And those who feel threatened by this silence merely demonstrate their dependence on others' imbalance to maintain their own control. But the most powerful form of silence is not the one that disturbs others, but the one that restores inner strength. It's a silence that connects you to something beyond external evaluation. It is in this inner space, free from others' demands, that the restoration of vital energy and reunification with one's own essence begins. And this is an important topic for further discussion. for it is not enough to simply wall oneself off from external noise. One must relearn how to consciously manage their energy, choose where to direct it, where to conserve it, and most importantly, where not to waste it. It's time to become selective with your own soul. However, it's useless to understand all of this theoretically if, in practice, one continues to say yes when they want to say no, reply to irritating messages, engage in meaningless conversations, and maintain relationships that exist merely out of inertia. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. True transformation begins with a firm decision to become selective, and this requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not a display of coldness, arrogance, or indifference, but a refusal to be available to everyone, always, and for every reason. It is taking control of your own energy, time, and peace. And it starts with small steps, not replying instantly, taking a breath before reacting, exiting a discussion before being drawn into chaos, turning off your phone without guilt, saying, "Not today, I'm not interested in that," or "I won't get involved in this." In reality, there's no need to justify your detachment or explain periods of silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. This stance might elicit disapproval from others, as refusing to explain deprives them of the ability to control your emotional state, keeping you in the familiar narrative where you are always ready to serve, understand, and be available. As Carl Jung noted, the process of individuation inevitably includes a period of isolation, not an isolation dictated by depression, but a sacred solitude. This time is necessary to restore the ability to hear one's inner voice, unmuted by the external world, and to reevaluate one's identity based on one's own convictions, rather than on the opinions of others. To assess your progress on the path of personal growth, pay attention to those who distance themselves when you become more withdrawn, who try to provoke you when you stop reacting, and who accuse you of changing when you start protecting your interests. These occurrences don't indicate mistakes. They confirm the beginning of your liberation. Refusing availability can cause discomfort and guilt. You might feel selfish or hear accusations of being too harsh, but this is an unavoidable part of the deconstruction process. You've grown accustomed to putting your own interests last, so changes cause discomfort, not only for you, but also for those who benefited from your previous behavior pattern. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. By saying no to the world, you say yes to yourself. By withdrawing from toxic environments, you affirm that your peace of mind is more important than any false connections. By ceasing to justify yourself, you earn respect, even if not from everyone. However, not everyone is ready for such a display of independence, as emotional detachment exposes wounds that others are unwilling to confront. It reveals how much they depended on your emotional chaos to feel in control of the situation. It is at this moment that a break occurs, accompanied by pain, loneliness, alienation, and a sense of loss, though in reality, it is liberation. So what happens after distancing yourself? What is born from silence? It is a rebirth that becomes possible only when you have the courage to be misunderstood, to remain alone, and to become whole independently. It's time to realize that the solitude of the strong is the path to true freedom. When a person ceases to be available to everyone, profound changes begin to unfold in their life. First, there's silence, a heavy quietness that seems to scream internally. Doubts arise about the correctness of the chosen path, about being too harsh, and about the potential loss of loved ones. But gradually, this silence transforms, purifies, calms, and heals. Then comes solitude, not the loneliness of absence, but the solitude of complete presence, of belonging to oneself. This is the solitude of the strong, of those who no longer betray themselves to keep others close. Clarity of thought and understanding of the situation replace the former confusion. Anxieties and worries give way to deep inner peace. Where resources felt scarce, a new inner strength emerges, enabling one to feel the wholeness of their being. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist, asserted that the process of individuation, that is, becoming oneself, requires separation from collective opinion, shedding imposed social masks, and a readiness for a period of solitude. This is precisely what happens when a person decides to become less available to the outside world. It's not an escape from reality, but rather a return to oneself, to one's true needs and desires. At this moment, the individual ceases to be a passive object of external influences and transforms into an active creator of their own life. They no longer succumb to circumstances, but begin to shape their reality based on internal convictions and values. People who experience discomfort due to such a change demonstrate that they needed not the person, but merely the role they played. And now, when the person abandons that role, they feel lost and don't know how to react. But this is liberation. Yes, you might have to part ways with some people, but in return, you will find yourself. You will distance yourself from familiar places, but reconnect with your essence. There will be a risk of being misunderstood by others, but ultimately, this will lead to earned respect. For when a person ceases to be available to everyone, they become valuable, rare, and unforgettable. Make no mistake, this is a true rebirth, a new beginning, the start of a life where there's no longer room for emotional handouts, manipulation, or the emptiness hidden beneath the mask of attachment. Now, you accept only what resonates with your inner peace, your truth, and your wholeness. And if this moment has arrived, it means a part of you is ready for change. You've realized that universal approval means nothing if it requires sacrificing yourself. True self-love begins with choosing yourself, even if it temporarily means solitude. The question arises, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even hated for the sake of your inner freedom? Are you ready to pay this price for the right to be yourself? If this message resonates and feels important, it's worth declaring your choice. I choose my peace. It would be interesting to know how many people are ready for such a transition.